Hello, and welcome to Learning Outcome Leaders, brought to you by Genio. I'm James, and I'm Scott, and in this podcast, you'll hear us chatting to higher education professionals who can talk the talk about how they've been there and done it.
We'll discuss some of their proudest and most ambitious projects and explore the most effective ways in which they've helped to improve and elevate their students' experience. In this episode, we chat with Denise Henry, Director at the Center for Teaching, Learning and Leadership from Colorado State University Pueblo, about her incredible journey from high school dropout to math education expert, fueled by a single teacher who shifted her mindset. We discuss why technology should be an accelerator rather than a shiny object, and how tools like NotebookLM are future-proofing student skills. Want to find out more? Let's get into the episode.
So if you want to go ahead and start, what are you doing now, where are you at, and how did you get there?
Okay, great. Okay, so what I do now is I am the director for the Center of Teaching, Learning and Leadership at Colorado State University in Pueblo. It's a regional comprehensive institution, rural area. Many first-generation students. We are also, up until recently, we were designated as a minority-serving institution, but that designation's gone away. We are still designated as a Hispanic-Serving institution. We were the first Purple Heart Institute. I don't know exactly how to say this, and I should look it up, but it's we're designated as a Purple Heart institution. It's a designation for veterans. It's an award that they receive. So we have a large number of veterans here. There's a large military presence in the area. And so we're a small campus, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 in-person students, and then a large number of students online in another area of learning on campus. Nursing program is really big. We have a lot of health science majors as well. So it's a nice little campus. I've been here about 5 years. My son and my stepkid go to school here. They're both in the pre-nursing program. I also, let's see, what else do I do here? So as a small institution, you get to do more than one thing. So I have lots of committees that needs to help run the campus. So I also work with the learning management system. That was my first job here. I was the administrator for the LMS. And then when COVID hit, I began working more with the teaching and learning side of using the LMS, and kind of did the job that I wanted until I got the job I wanted.
So what got you in? What got you into working in education?
So I was probably what would be labeled as an at-risk youth myself. Uh, Grew up in an unstable house. Didn't really go to school after about 10th grade. I just didn't show up. But Gen X kids had a different educational experience. They just kind of passed us along no matter how we did. And so I graduated high school, and just kind of kicked around, lived at the beach, just hung out mostly, not really doing much with my life. And then I had a pretty extreme life experience that made me start questioning just like uh, uh, how 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 does society actually support people to go from being a kid to being a functioning adult? And if you don't have anyone at home or anyone in your community guiding you, how is that supposed to happen? And it wasn't happening for me, and it wasn't happening for my brothers and sisters, and it just made me think about a lot of stuff. And so I decided I wanted to work with youth that needed extra support. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a social worker, a psychologist. I didn't know if I wanted to be in the juvenile justice system or a teacher, but I just knew I wanted to work with kids. So uh, I went down to the local community college and took the placement test. And that was literally the first time I ever saw an algebraic variable in my life. And I was like, well, this is going to be challenging. I did well on the reading part because I really like to read, so I was an avid reader, but I wasn't walking around doing much math in my life. So I went to community college, had a really hard time the first few years. It was a real struggle to learn. I had varying amounts of support from the educators there. And then I finally got to the classes where I would earn credit for mathematics. And my algebra teacher, his name is Dean Moore, and he is the only teacher's name that I can remember in my entire life. And he was amazing. He was like, look, Denise, you are not dumb. You are just really far behind. So this is going to be hard, but you can do it. He took me to the tutoring center. He would let me come into his office and rework tests and ask him questions. And he really just cheerleaded me through this course. And I made an A in his algebra class. And I was like, oh, I can do this. And someone really smart believes in me that I can do this. And so that experience changed my entire learning trajectory for college. So I finished community college, got my AA degree. In the States, if you go to a state community college, you're automatically accepted into the state university. So I was automatically accepted over there. Still didn't know exactly what I wanted to study. And I was fortunate enough to be given the chance to do kind of a liberal studies, choose your own pathway kind of degree program. I had to do a couple of required classes, but I got to put together my entire degree program and be supervised by one professor throughout those last 2 years. And so I studied juvenile justice, social work, psychology, behavioral psychology, cognitive psychology, kept on with the math because I decided I liked it. And then when I got out of college, I had this liberal studies degree. I didn't know what I was going to do with it still. Uh, and so I got a job in a charter school with at-risk kids working as a teacher's assistant in a math classroom. And I was like, oh, it was behavioral, it was social support, it hit all the buttons with the way I wanted to work with youth. And those were the schools and the educational settings I sought out for many years. So I worked on mental health residential treatment campuses. I worked in regular schools in like the Algebra Restart program for kids who'd not been successful 2 or 3 times getting through class. And I think that coming from a place where mathematics never came easy to me, it was hard to learn. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't consider myself an intelligent person. It gave me a different lens to work with youth who were feeling the same way. And long, long before Carol Dweck published on growth mindset, I figured out the first thing you have to do is help someone believe in themselves and, find their superpower and understand that they're not stupid. They're just really far behind. And that's also how I fell into educational technology. In the early 2000s, when I first started teaching, there became a big focus on data collection and quantifying learning and, penalties for schools if they weren't showing progress and punitive interventions for children. I would teach classes where if a student hadn't performed at the right level on their state test the previous year, instead of getting PE, they got an extra math class. Well, that's the worst thing you can do to a 12-year-old boy, is not let him run around, and a girl too, like, forcing children, "Oh, you're terrible at this, let's just give you more and ram it down your throat," and so it was awful, and so, uh, I very quickly shifted away from traditional sit and get kind of teaching that was transactional and felt more like it was done to students. I worked on, uh, building a community where kids wanted to be because they knew they were cared about and supported, and, where the learning would happen, but all this other stuff would happen too. And, a lot of times kids were in communities where they just, it wasn't even safe to go outside after school. So their social time was limited. They didn't have athletics, in their communities, things like that. So, um, uh, I did crazy things like created a classroom economy and printed out little Denise dollars, and students uh, basically ran the class, and it was like their own little ecosystem there. So every student had a job. The class would run itself. I'd teach the lesson a little bit, but they were materials distributors and collectors. They took attendance. I took attendance too, but they took, so they were just responsible for running this learning community, beginning to end. And uh, through activities like that and through playing with math more than just doing math, engaging in project-based learning, um, and personalized learning using technology, they were able to make really good progress, in their learning. And most of it was getting over that hump of believing they could do it, and then feeling comfortable taking academic risks.
I found something like that as a student myself, when actually getting involved in maths. I was someone that always found maths hard, but part of it was because I was just always told by my teachers that it was hard, and because I wasn't getting it, well, it's just hard, work harder, that sort of thing. And I remember having a teacher come in one day, and we learned vectors through doing a dance to Snoop Dogg's "Drop It Like It's Hot."
I love it.
Like the most random hour of my life where I didn't stop laughing, but I performed the best on vectors out of everything in that high school because it got me out of this sitting in a line, staring at a piece of paper and just wanting the world to swallow me up. So I think you sort of touched on something there that I think is important. And I think me and Scott have had this as well, where being able to come from a position when you're teaching or talking about something from a lived experience. So talking to a student and saying, when in our case, when we're talking with students with accessibility barriers, for me, I can say, as a student that had note-taking needs, or Scott saying, something about sort of as a student that had dyslexia, these are barriers and I understand it. Those students really assimilate to that a lot easier. And for yourself, being able to have that non-traditional background and going into education from a completely different background can really help in those conversations. Did you find that students were able to sort of assimilate more to you and your experiences? Is that something that you typically shared with students as part of
Oh, yeah.
that support and things? Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. I did let them know. And, I always suspected that I had something weird going on with my brain with, like, the way I would see numbers on paper, but it wasn't until I started teaching math that I realized I was dyslexic. So that was a lot of fun as a math teacher. So I have to be really, really careful, but I'd also make mistakes. And my students would help me, "Hey, Miss Henry, you have the numbers mixed up," or "I don't think that looks right," and so that it's creating an atmosphere where we are humans coming together to learn together. I'm learning, you're learning. Uh, it's it's not this top-down authoritarian thing that's being done to you. We're here uh, to understand how math shows up in the whole world. Uh, you know, kids don't even know how math is used in the real world unless we do projects with them and expose them to the way mathematics is just present in things, but it's not the thing. So, I'd help teachers facilitate project-based learning with 5, 6-year-olds where they're redesigning their playground. They're using mathematics, but they're using mathematics in a real they're like, "Oh, this is math?" And so it's that just forcing students to sit in front of a textbook and grind out calculations that have been solved by thousands of other students already is not interesting. It's not interesting to me. It's not, that's not what math is. And one of my favorite classes to teach was high school geometry, um, in a school where the geometry curriculum was all investigations, and it was deriving the theorems, instead of just here memorize this theorem. So it was coming to them, and we use technology there too, like GeoGebra and stuff to explore. Um, uh, but it's helping in logic. Oh my gosh, the logic unit was so much fun. They're like, "This is math. Perspective drawing is math," and just helping students see that math is like, it's the code behind the matrix. It's running. It's everywhere. "Well, I hate math. I hate math." "Do you like money?" "Money is math." It's like, "Oh, I like money." So, just tapping into students' interests, knowing them, getting to know them, and like genuinely enjoying people and learning and kids is so, so important. Back when I first started teaching in alternative education, uh, special ed kids were generally placed in my class. Schools didn't know what to do with them. They would, if they weren't experiencing severe enough difficulties to be placed in a separate school, they were just kind of like, well, do we just keep them in one room all day over here? Do we put them in different classes? Do we send people in? Do we send them out? Like it takes schools like and I haven't been in a K-12 class in about 5 or 6 years, so I can't talk about that system right now, what's currently happening, but it just always seemed like people just weren't sure what to do with students who learned a little bit differently or had or who are just different. But I don't think there's anything I don't think there's such a thing as a typical normal student. We're all different people in our own ways. And being able to acknowledge that publicly with your students, tap into that, let them know that everything about them is their superpower, really cheerlead that and help them leverage their strengths is so, so important. Um, when kids grow up feeling like this deficit mentality, "Oh, there's something wrong with me," and "Oh, my brain's a little broken," and, it just those things carry on throughout someone's life. I ask adults, if they can remember the best experience that ever happened to them in school, and if they can remember the worst experience. They mostly remember the worst experience, and those because that emotion and learning center is so close to each other in our brain, um, there's there's so much emotion tied into learning, and we as educators can boost it or we can kill it, um, for kids.
Excellent. I resonate a lot when I was in school. So having dyslexia, like English or literature classes for me were like incredibly difficult. And I was always like in the sets, like the bottom set.
Yeah.
And but I went to university and did a film degree, and now I like fully understand story structure, analysis, like character development, like characterizations and everything you would do in a literature class, but just for
Mhm.
a format. So like fully appreciate everything you said, and just finding that thing for you. So we've spoken a bit over email, and I know that you've got like you were really interested in talking about. I'm really interested also in talking about this future-proofing student learning that you're working on. So can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of like what it is, top level, and then we can dig a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah. So, just to touch back on what you just said about the way you've learned literature, that is so, so important. That learning the content can be embedded in things that interest students in different ways. I learned history through art history. I was never history never clicked with me. The memorizing, all of that stuff did not click with me. But when I got to community college and took an art history class, I love art. And I was like, oh, and just seeing the iconography and the way that the times were reflected in the paintings and the sculptures, it all just made so much sense to me. So I think that's what you said is really so, so important. And when we chop learning up into discrete little packages, and in the States, we do it worse with mathematics. This is algebra 1. This is algebra 2. You can't do calculus because you never learned algebra 2. So we're going to do a pre-calculus class. What other subject has do you do pre-reading? So it's crazy. So yes. Okay, so future-proofing learning. Um, so I started teaching, my first class was in 2000 of my own, and the internet was just coming into schools. And people were freaking out. Not gonna learn anymore, they're just gonna cheat, they're just gonna type questions in this magic box, it's gonna give them the answers. Teachers would have 1 or 2 computers in the back of their room, but they'd never turn them on. Um, uh, at that time, I was differentiating learning and trying to do personalized learning with worksheets in a crate for about 200 kids a day. And so we would do project-based learning, and then we would have a couple days a week where we'd also work on just individual skill building so that I could tailor instruction to what the student needed instead of just throwing some blanket lesson over everyone and maybe hitting somebody in the middle. So, and that was more engaging and motivating for them because they were working on what they needed to work on themselves. So they felt, that personalization. And these are students that, marginalized students typically don't have a lot of control over their lives and things that happen in their lives. Most kids don't have a lot of decisions anyway. So this was giving them a sense of control and directing, their learning pathways and being involved in their own learning. They were tracking their learning. So it hit a lot of just like metacognitive pieces and I don't know, socio-emotional pieces for them as well. So then one of my principals came out and said, hey, we've got this software where your students can work on some math problems and it'll give you some data, some reporting, and you can use that instead of that whole crate full of worksheets over there. So I was like, yes, so let's try it. And so that got me onto the thing of using technology like a tool to help me accelerate students' learning. Um, so then we would play some math games in class also. I had physical math games and then digital math games started coming out, but most of them were very thin, like a reward for doing the math. There was this clicker program that had just come out called Quizdone. They got me a set of those. And I was able to program in my own math questions and the the, uh, the correctness of their math question responses, the correctness of their responses advanced them through the game. So what it was directly tied to the learning. You know, it wasn't as sophisticated as the stuff that's out now, but it was directly tied to that. So, and I had 7th graders trying to skip other classes on Fridays to come to my remedial math class to play math games because they heard it was fun in there. That's when I knew I was winning at teaching. I was like, this is what we want. This is what we want. We want students to be here. So, I just kind of kept technology in the background. I used it organizationally. But it wasn't really like, like some tech nerd, like I'm gonna learn to code or anything like that. I just had a kind of a perspective of it's a tool, but it's not the focus of what I'm doing. There was a lot of other things that it couldn't do. And then so that was my first disruption I experienced with technology in education. We got through that. People stopped panicking. The internet didn't break education. We're still learning. And then when I was teaching high school, PhotoMath app came out. The apps that you could scan an equation, and it could be a handwritten equation or a typed equation. It would step it out for you and solve it for you. And people were freaking out. Oh my God, they're never going to solve another equation, whatever. And I was like, well, what if we had them solve the equation or try to get as far as they can in the problem and then scan it and see if the app came up with something different than they did. Let's have them do some analysis. Am I more efficient in my solving steps, or are they more efficient? How is it being stepped out? There's so much like rich modeling there that could happen. So that felt like another disruption. Wasn't as big as the internet, but that was another disruption. Phones becoming ubiquitous in the schools, another disruption. Now they have access to solutions, solvers, all this different stuff in their pocket immediately. So, and then one-to-ones came out in classes. We started issuing computers, and now kids as young as like 3rd grade, kindergarten, they're working in a one-to-one environment every day. Students come into college expecting technology to be used. They have now been in environments where they're pretty much working in an LMS. They can go online. They can see what their assignments are, what their grades are, communicate with their teachers. So they're using technology in much more sophisticated ways than many of us as current educators used it when we were kids. So I think that creates kind of a sense of discomfort and makes it hard to know sometimes how much technology do I bring into my class. Am I chasing shiny things for the sake of bringing technology into my class because it looks cool, looks fun? Or is it purposeful and aligned to a learning objective or a learning intention? How is it an enabler, an accelerator, a tool versus just this thing we want to try out and play with? And there's space for that too, but we have to be careful not to chase shiny things and lose track of the learning. I did my master's degree at San Diego State University with in a program that was the first time it ran. It was for educators across the state. It was about 2007. It was complete distance learning, which wasn't really big back then. I think we were on Adobe Connect for our online synchronous meetings. So that tells you how old it is. We did a class on Second Life, and that was the new thing back then. So that tells you how old that was. That was before it got really weird in there. It was already weird, but it got, what I'm saying? But people were starting to do some cool stuff with, technology back then. Like Harvard had a classroom in Second Life and stuff like that. So, that program was headed up by Bernie Dodge, who founded in the state of California, Computer Using Educators organization. He was the first person to bring technology into school, or like not bring it into school, but like propose that technology is useful as a learning tool. Here's ways we can use it as a learning tool, but not make it the focus of learning, that kind of thing. So in the course of that master's degree that I did with them, it really consolidated the perspective of technology is a tool that you use at the right time for the right job. There's many ways to use it for productivity, for communication, and for learning. And those are all kind of embedded together with all those 21st century skills, the 4 Cs that we were talking about in the early 2000s. And then, so that was a really rich experience that helped me consolidate that perspective. And when the United States tried to move to a national curriculum for math and language arts with Common Core, the 4 Cs were brought back and highlighted. In mathematics, we had a set of content standards now, and we also had math practice standards, which for the first time ever, we were thinking about the dispositions of mathematicians, of mathematically proficient people. They were the same 8 practice standards across all grades, but they looked different for a 5-year-old than a 15-year-old because you're thinking it's different, but they were the same habits of mind. So all that got mushed together into my perspective of good teaching is good teaching, good learning is good learning. There are enduring skills, knowledge, and dispositions that we need to be successful, functional, productive in our careers outside of college that technology cannot replace. Technology cannot do some things that we as humans can do. It can help us do some of those things that we can do, but it can't replace our humanity. It can communicate with these LLMs, and people are having conversations with LLMs in different ways. But if you use LLMs frequently, you can tell when someone is giving you something that's been written by an LLM. You can tell when it's a genuine human creation of art versus an AI video or painting. There's something just a little bit off, right? So there's these future-proof skills. When I talk with faculty, I've been starting with just what is learning? What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to learn? What does it look like? And is it a process or is it a product? If we come at learning is a product, then absolutely a computer can do everything for us. It's great at spitting out products all day long. That's what it's designed to do. We just become, extensions of that machine that just feeds it information to give us this thing. Here it is, we're done, move on. Or is it a process, that is my perspective, that learning happens in the process, and by the time you get to the end, you exhale. Yes, well done, we pushed through that thing, and then you look around for the next challenge. And then you continue learning. The process pieces are what technology can enhance, or we can allow them to supplant. And it's all in the way that we facilitate learning.
That's something. Sorry, I was just going to say that.
No, go, yeah.
Completely agree with. We often talk about this idea of learning being a process rather than an event. I think back to, as a kid, if you're in high school, I know sometimes you'd not really sort of pay attention maybe for one class and someone would give you the right answers. You wouldn't then memorize those right answers instantaneously and be able to do it in an exam. You have to have been in the class, processing that information, taking it down, understanding it in different ways, applying it to something. And so when we've looked at, when we talk about AI, like you said, it's very easy to type into the text box, give me this, and it can make images, it can do anything for you now. But actually, as a student, that isn't going to be something that is productive, like you said, right? It's the actual saying to an AI, if you're going to use it, I'm studying this topic, give me some questions about this, or what might I need to learn, or what are the extra readings that I might need to do, and find me those so I can go away and I can start making that information and reframing those things, or typing an answer in and sort of going through that. So yeah, I think definitely that idea of not using it as just a productivity tool has got to be absolutely at the forefront. And you've talked a lot about sort of that opportunity. What are the challenges that you've seen when it comes to trying to reframe what AI looks like for the student, when you've sort of had conversation with students, and then I guess also with faculty? What are those challenges that you've seen?
At university, it's a bit different than that K-12 system. University faculty spend a lot of time and uh, thinking deeply about certain topics, um, but few are ever given the opportunity to think deeply about how to facilitate learning of those topics. And so we have teaching methods perpetuated, or I see a lot of K-12 methods repackaged and proposed towards higher education faculty with a little bit different language. Uh, but a lot of it is very, very similar, almost identical. Um, but they're kind of left on their own in a lot of cases to figure out how to implement those things. Classroom observations aren't a prevalent practice in higher ed like they are in K-12. Like we would, we'd go to each other's classes, we'd meet together frequently, at least once a month, in some of our schools, and more often than that because we're having lots of hallway conversations about, things that are happening in our classes and looking at uh, students' work and how did you approach this and what did you, oh, that's a good idea, like that kind of collaborative thing. At university, there's so many demands on faculty, even though they spend at my school, at this regional comprehensive, they spend a lot of time teaching classes, marking student work, talking with students. They don't get that same amount of time to cultivate their own teaching uh, toolkit. And so it's a it's a different um it's a different way of approaching teaching and learning. Um, some faculty do not want to use technology at all. They do not believe that that is the best way for their students to learn and engage with the content. Uh, that is absolutely valid. Absolutely. In those instances, we can still build students' technical literacy, which is going to be present in every career. Every aspect of every job is going to have some piece of technology in it. Some more than others, but everything will have some piece of technology. So we need to attend to building their technical literacy. But that doesn't mean we have to use it. That also means understanding that's that discrimination piece. Why are we not using it? Why is this not the best way? What does technology take away from the learning in this instance? Or what does technology do to enhance our learning in this instance? And so, technical literacy is a future-proof skill. Um, because we're all, students are learning to discriminate those instances when they need to pull out their phone and use an LLM, or when they don't. When it's okay to just write an off-the-cuff email to someone, or when you need to maybe write it and then ask an LLM to refine your language, or check it for tone or something like that if you're upset, or there's ways to leverage it. Um, so for me, I want to make sure that I send the most prepared students out into the world, just like with my kid. Told him the whole time growing up, by the time you're 18, I want you to be able to take care of yourself. I want you to be around me because you love me and you need me, but I don't want you to be dependent on me. So I don't want to make students dependent on technology, and I don't want them to be ignorant of the use as well. So there's, from the learning side. From the teaching side, there are so many ways that I can enhance teaching, especially with tools like NotebookLM. Oh my gosh, I've been on that thing for since the first day it came out. I just stumbled on it and it's amazing. For universal design for learning, aspects and multiple means of representation, it takes a very long time to create content for students in pictorial, video, audio, and text. But I can use technology to do that very quickly. So I can enhance learning using tools like that. So as a teacher, I can tap into students' learning preferences or what they have time to do, um, uh, by getting content to them in a way that they can listen to it while they're commuting, or they can sit and watch a quick video, or they can read, or they can use all of those things and see how they interconnect and complement the learning in different ways. So they're taking in information differently.
So can I ask, talking about Notebook LM then, I see like a lot of value in it, especially for faculty, right? To be able to, like you said, to be able to put their content into a notebook and then be able to produce like ask it to produce material basically for them based off their content. Are you are you discussing that with faculty then? And
Oh,
like
yeah.
what's like their response to that? Like, are they engaged with it? What's going on there?
For about the last 2 or 3 years, so um, am in my life outside of school, I've been doing, jujitsu and judo for a really long time, and, I coach. And so about 3 years ago, I wanted to learn more about coaching science. I'd never formally studied coaching. And so I started, getting papers and all this research, and there's some beautiful work coming out of Leeds Sheffield. Oh my gosh, I could was a whole 'nother thing I could talk to y'all. You guys should talk to some of those guys. They're amazing because they're all talking about how, uh, built on ecological, psychology and perception. Oh, it's beautiful. So, um, I wanted to learn more, and I had no background. I didn't know the lingo, I didn't know the jargon, really didn't have a lot of entry points, but I was gonna learn it just on my own. Somehow I stumbled on NotebookLM, and it was when they were first developing it. So the Google developers would have Google Meets with university faculty and students and staff from all over the world, and they would meet up and like, "Hey, it'd be cool if it did this, and what about that?" And they've got a Discord that's still super active with people sharing use cases and ideas with them, and, they just continue to evolve that. It's evolved so much over the last 3 years. So after about a year of using it and seeing the value for myself as a learner, I started going out to classes and doing guest lessons for students about how to use it as a learning tool, how to use it as a reading tutor and a writing tutor. But we start out talking about willful ignorance and intellectual laziness. And we think about someone we know who is just intellectually lazy. They hear a soundbite, they repeat that, they have no factual basis for it. You know they're wrong. They probably know they're wrong, but they're going to die on that hill because they're just going to say this thing. I'm like, we don't want to be that person. You got up and came here today to not be that person. So let's use technology to help boost our learning and find ways to, like technical papers or academic writing is not something that high school students read at all. They are not reading papers like they are in college. So they don't have that same practice. They don't have the practice to access the reading. the content in a lot of cases. So if someone can't access the material, they can't learn it. And it's just going to frustrate them. It's a barrier. So opening access is huge for me. So I'm like, okay, so let's find a way to open access for you. So first thing I want you to do, so I start my lesson with, I get a piece of content from the instructor's class, because I want the instructor to see the students physically reading this and how long it takes to get through a small portion of it, a small portion of the assigned reading. So they're like, because I don't think they get to see, like, how long does it really take them to read this thing, right? So I'll just have them read like the first page. Bring it out, hard copy, or give them a digital copy. They read it, and then they write a summary before we even touch technology at all. Read this thing, right, and I just do a quick write. Punctuation doesn't matter, spelling doesn't matter. Just brain dump. What did you take away from this? What are the big, the major takeaways from that little reading passage? It takes them a lot longer to read. It probably takes them 3 times the amount of time to read than we expect them that it does for this small bit. And they're like actually sitting there trying to read. I see them actively reading, circling, underlining, whatever. So then I have them, I show them how to upload that white paper to a NotebookLM, and how to they either type it in what they just wrote, or they copy and paste it, and then have NotebookLM critique their writing. So we talk about how to prompt to get what we want. So we want to know, is my grammar, spelling, and flow correct? So do I have, the key things spelled correctly? And then, am I factually correct? Does what I wrote match what the source document says about this information? And like that, they have all of that returned to them. Now they can go back to that reading, and now that process piece of, now their brain is firing, right? Their brain was firing before, but now it's really firing because they're like analyzing what the NotebookLM gave them against what they thought. And now comparing those two things is massive for learning. Here's what I thought it said. Here's what this thing is telling me it said. This thing NotebookLM will tell me where the source, is checking my source and giving me a reference back to my source, so I can click on the little source citation number, and then a window will pop up, and I can just focus in on that passage that relates to what it's talking about over here. So it's very targeted as well, like, oh, I thought this meant that, but oh, I was right. I was on the right track. So that's when their brains really start lighting up. That's the process piece that I care about. That's what I care about. If you nailed it the first time, you learned nothing. You did what you already knew how to do. The more mistakes you make, the more learning is happening, and the more you're critically analyzing. So when people are saying, oh, it just takes away all the critical thinking, maybe. Depends on how you're using it. Because you can write a good prompt. That takes some critical thinking. You've got to refine that prompt. It doesn't give you back what you wanted. Is that because the machine is dumb or hallucinating or, whatever? Or is that because your question wasn't phrased in a way that it would give you what you were meant to ask it, what you were thinking about you wanted it? So, that's my lesson that I do with students. So I did those kinds of lessons for about a year, and then I started the doctoral program here on campus for educational leadership. And so now I am using NotebookLM as a student in my own classes, and I'm reading large numbers of papers and writing a lot about them and having to understand them and get through this information. So being a busy person, I will create podcasts and ask, very targeted questions and have it do analysis across papers about certain things. And then I listen to those on my commute back and forth to work. So I'm engaging with the information that way. I'm reading the papers. I'm writing about the papers. I'm living the learning, if that makes sense. Like it's just there. It's present for me in ways that I can connect. And so I show students that whole process. I show them how to use an app called Lit Maps to find papers that connects with our university library system. If the paper is not open source, they can get it through the university most of the time. So how to find papers, and then how to understand what you're reading, make those connections, apply them to the work that you're doing. And uh, students stop me across campus and they're like, "Hey, I've been using that thing. I really love it." And that's exciting. Some faculty whose classes I've taught lessons in, they're like, "Hey, I'm using it for a lit review I'm doing right now." And um I'm struggling with this piece, or like that. Just like hearing them how they're using it, and uh that they're engaging with the technology themselves. That's how we become better facilitators of that learning. But that takes time, and that takes interest, and we can't expect everyone to have that time and that interest. So student experiences, from the little bit of poking around that I've done, for about 2/3 of the students, it can feel like going to a different country 4 or 5 times a week. I go over here, there's one set of customs, cultures, and laws. I go over here an hour later, completely different. Go over here 2 days later, completely different. Oh, then I'm going back to this first one, and where am I? What am I supposed to be doing here? And uh, that's a challenge. So just understanding that students are navigating that space. I'm not saying we change it. I'm not saying that, they shouldn't, that what, we all, teaching is inherently individual. We're all going to do things our own way, best way we think is should be done. The understanding that that's the student's experience can help us be more empathetic when we suspect misuse. Is this maybe not nefarious?
Yeah.
So my question with cheating is, my first question is always, what made you feel like you needed to do this? What's going on? It's a more of a like a trauma-informed teaching perspective, a trauma-informed practice of not, you know, looking at what you did, but more like, what's the reason behind what you did? Was it poor time management? Do you not know how to manage time? Did someone in your family get sick? Are you just really are you feeling imposter syndrome so hard and so insecure about your writing that you just straight up had this machine write it because you didn't think you could do anything of quality to turn in? What can I do as an educator to support you doing your own work? If it repeats, then we deal with that, as a different problem. But coming at it in a more like human way, because that's what humans bring to this process of learning.
I think that's super important. I think having that, being on the front foot and being open and welcoming with those sorts of conversations, whether that be something like plagiarism and misuse of AI, whatever that might be, and how that manifests itself. I think it's something that I think as a whole education industry, we're definitely getting better at. When I even think back to when I was at school and things like that, I think it's super important, and particularly when we look at AI, creating those positive use cases, those creating the message for students and faculty of how this can be of a benefit, but also some of the risks and things that can be associated. I think as we sort of start to wrap up this episode, and it's been really, really interesting to get all your experiences. If we could boil it down to sort of, I want to say, one tip or piece of advice that you've got for other people working in higher education when it comes to moving through this next this next barrier, this next sort of change in technology, what would that be?
Kind of a combo tip. So the first part of it is this may be the first major disruption you've experienced in education, but it will not be the last. So keeping that perspective will help you remain a little bit calmer. This won't be the last one, especially in the States right now. Education is very much in a state of flux. The second thing is, for higher education, connect with industry partners, connect with people outside the campus, and find out how our artists, musicians, engineers, nurses, athletic trainers, electricians, construction managers, how are people in the industries of your discipline using technology now? What changes are they seeing? What do they expect from graduates? And then bring that back and align your learning to where your students are going. That is our job in higher ed. We are the last stop before career. Even if the career is pursuing a doctorate degree somewhere and going into education yourself. How are these technologies being used, and prepare our students? I feel like I failed at my job. I failed my students if they get to a job interview and they're asked to do a task for that interview that involves AI, and they're like, I wasn't allowed to use it in college, so yeah. Our students are on a trajectory. When we introduced Common Core, one of the videos I would show teachers was a girl sitting in for an interview. She was like fresh out of college or high school, and she just like this interview, and the interviewer is asking her a question, and her only response was, "I choose C. I choose C," because in most multiple choice tests, C is the right answer. And so she was prepared for a multiple choice response. She didn't know the answer, so she took her best guess. Like, to me, that's kind of like, if we don't connect everyday experiences, everyday communication, collaboration, critical thinking, with the student's experience, technological, non-technological, they're not going to be fully prepared for those experiences in life and career after graduation.
I think that's such a valuable tip for a lot of institutions to hear, is like, especially when, when you look at like community colleges as well, who are like work very, very close with the working world around them, and they're effectively preparing students for that working world within that community, to actually have those conversations and go, what do you want from a student, right? What is important when it comes to technology, especially around AI? So awesome. Just like James said, this has been super insightful. Really, really lovely chat. I hope you've had a good time as well.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff. You guys are lovely people, so thank you.
Amazing. Well, we'll end it there, but thank you very much for being on here. And I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us on Learning Outcome Leaders. We hope you found the conversation valuable and that it gave you some ideas for how you can elevate your own student experience.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Until next time, have an amazing day.